Well, it's been another fantastic episode, our series Food for Thought with Sir James Green. And in our sessions here, we speak about many interesting issues, cultural and historical, scientific issues about the world we live in, especially now in this period of coronavirus and how the world might be changing. Tonight we have the dinner we have enjoyed today was we did I did a sugo de salchicha, which is the sauce made out of sausage with spaghetti. We had Sir James brought a couple of bottles of wine, red wine, and a chocolate roll, and we've had a magnificent time. And so here he is, Sir James.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me take the camera here. As you can see, our technology is is catching up. So yeah, we often reach this kind of phase in the early hours, and we think back, how did we arrive at this point? Where did this all start? And of course, like most evenings, it started with talking about the virus. But I suppose today we were what kind of got this going was that a friend of Oscar's had heard in the news that there's actually been something of a scandal in that many people in Italy had applied for this €600 indemnity, or this support mechanism for people who either lost work or lost their jobs or lost income due to this. And remember that we've been in lockdown for over 40 days now. And this magic number of €600 was such a beacon of hope for so many people, this great lauded support. And it appears to have emerged today that barely half of the people who applied for that will actually get it, because apparently, according to sources, that money has run out. So we were thinking what the implications of this will be beyond, political scandal. We often joke, those of us who are foreigners, so to speak, who live in Italy, about trying to communicate how dysfunctional the Italian state is and how corrupt it is simply impossible to communicate to somebody who doesn't live here. We talk about the failures and the inefficiencies of it, and it's often a laughing matter for most people, but for the people who live here, it's something far worse than that. And it's a common point of discussion. We think, what will be the moment that actually tips Italy over the edge? Italy's been teetering on the edge of total economic failure for 20 years now, but somehow it's always managed to soldier its way through. But there's kind of something different now, in the sense that Italy was in a very bad situation even before this virus struck. And according to even conservative projections, Italy stands to lose almost a tenth of its GDP this year. And we know that 3 or 4 weeks ago, probably a bit more than that, it suffered the single worst drop of the stock market in its history. Since the Milan Stock Exchange was first founded over 100 years ago. So now we're thinking that something interesting here is that this was such a powerful symbol of hope, of support to ordinary people, not the country, but to ordinary people, this €600, and the fact that people will now be presented with the fact that they're not getting it. And we've already heard stories that there have been people storming supermarkets in Palermo and Sicily and other places because they've run out of money to pay for food. And we've often discussed about the wisdom of this lockdown strategy. Of course, there have been many pandemics in history, but never a response like this. So we're thinking maybe this could be the thing which finally pushes Italy over the edge. And we both, and other people I know, tend to have quite strong opinions about this, because there's now a polarization in Europe between people who think that Italy should be bailed out and those who think that Italy has had quite enough support already in the past, and it's time to pay the bill which it should have paid decades ago, and carry out the reforms it should have carried out decades ago. And Italy's really been a very lucky country for most of its existence after the war, because of its strategic importance. It's received many loans and economic and financial support from the Americans. And then since the euro was introduced in this century, again, there's been this kind of mechanism of enduring mediocrity, shall we say. But this threatens to be a storm which kind of overturns the boat, and we're thinking this particular development today could really be the straw which may well break the camel's back. A lot of people have tried to write Italy off before and have often been made to look quite silly, but we're possibly sticking our necks out here and thinking that this could be that moment. So this ballooned out into a much bigger discussion about how the order of the world could potentially change, and how this kind of fits into what's going on in the world, particularly the Western world, in the last few years. And I posited that it's very difficult to find a situation like this where you had coordinated movements which spanned national borders, were not just confined to single countries. And really, in the Western world, you're going back to the revolutions of 1848. I mean, you had the Russian Revolution after in the First World War, but it was a largely isolated example. But you have to go back to the revolutions of the mid-19th century or beyond. So, what the kind of ramifications for this are both slightly intimidating, but also quite exciting in a way. Both of us, again, have the controversial idea that what Italy really sorely needs is to fail. Because it could well be this and only this which forces it to make the reforms that it should have carried out a long time ago. And we both hope that the Germans hold the line, as it were, and resist these slightly embarrassing pleas by Italian newspapers for the so-called Corona bonds. Because in the long term, it could and probably would be better for everybody. So that's kind of how this all started off. But then we got to talking about a more bigger scale comparison of the Western, particularly the Italian system, compared to its more or less opposite, which is in China, which is of course by Western standards is totalitarian with no freedom of the press and all these things, but on the other hand is extraordinarily meritocratic. And has no need to worry about what is politically toxic, to use a buzzword that we have at the moment. And how better or not these two systems are for coping with a situation like this. And we had this fabulous flights of fantasy where we think what could happen, what would happen in either one of those situations with a scenario like this. And as with any good deep conversation, we reached few conclusions but had many ideas. So let's say that there's plenty of scope for future episodes of Food for Thought. Isn't that right?
Oh, absolutely. Well, that gives you an idea of the kind of depth and breadth of our discussions here among us, eating good food, drinking wine, and need a little bit of dessert. So, anyways, we'll have some more of these, and we'll talk to you later. See you later.
Bye.
Ciao. Bye.